Cyberpunk 2077 is an action RPG where you can roleplay as pretty much anything you want, no matter how insane it may be. For an example, you could be a taxi driver, a drunk taxi driver, or even a guy who calls a taxi when he's got places to be. Why are all these taxi related? With the help of a few mods, you can take your roleplay to the next level and become the God of Thunder by modding in Thor's hammer, and a couple of other Thor-related cyberware. The rules for this run are pretty simple. I'm only allowed to use Thor's hammer to deal damage, and the only cyberware I'm allowed to use are the 2 Thor-related pieces I modded in. Life as a straight white male is very hard, so that's gonna be the difficulty for this run. I wasn't sure if I wanted to make my character look like a lower accurate Thor or just Chris Hemsworth, so I compromised and made him look like Chris Hemsworth if he was drawn from memory by a blind man. As for the attribute points, since Thor's hammer is, as the name implies, a hammer, and a hammer is a hammer. What? The hammer is a blunt weapon, and as such, it scales with body, so that's where the majority of my points is gonna go. In the prologue, the god of poverty, Pepe, asks me to settle his debt with the god of unpaid debts named Kirk. Kirk tells me to steal a supercar to settle the said debt, and since stealing is good for the environment, I agree to do the job. The first step in my plan to steal the car is to take out Big Joe, or whatever this fat fuck's name is. It's not gonna help me steal the car, but I simply just wanted to kill him. I took his corpse along for the ride. It was too heavy, so I left it at the pool table and met Padre for a quick ride to my destination. He gives me his OnlyFans username on a piece of paper, and I do some sick parkour that probably reduced my ankle's lifespan by a few years. I eventually found the super vehicle, tried to steal it, got robbed by a Mexican, and get beat up by the police officers at the scene. Jackie and I ended up bonding over that shared beating, and the game cuts to 6 months later in the first mission where we have to rescue Sancho Dorset. I proceeded to call upon my hammer by using console commands, just like the real God of Thunder. But in a surprising turn of events, all I had in my inventory was the tiniest crowbar in the history of crowbars. It turns out that in my blacked out state, I actually forgot to download one of the mod requirements. So once I did just that and called upon my hammer once again, I was officially the God of Thunder. I also called upon the 2 other God of Thunder related cyberware in my inventory and made my way to the Scav hideout. Now what's cool about this hammer is that it's not just a reskinned knife, but a completely new weapon with its own unique powers. One of those powers, I guess, was crashing my game as soon as I got into combat. One of the other, less game-breaking powers was that if you throw the hammer with enough stamina remaining, it actually calls upon lightning on not only the target you hit, but also on any nearby enemies, which is pretty strong. Also, something that's really cool is that if you dash with enough stamina, you can actually call the hammer back into your hands. We eventually found the god of getting kidnapped, unkidnapped her, left the hideout, and arrived back home. The next day, it was time to finish my ascension and install the 2 pieces of modded cyberware I console commanded to my inventory a minute ago. The first piece allows me to shoot lightning from my left arm, which makes the enemies it hits vulnerable, and the second piece allows me to levitate in the air for a few seconds, just like a real god. After my surgery, Victor gives me some crack to help with the pain, and I meet with my black brother Loki to discuss a job. We're planning on stealing Odin's search history from Konpeki Plaza and exposing his online activities to the people so we can take control of Asgard. In order to accomplish our goal, we have to acquire the flathead from tech support, and a few minutes later, I meet with Jackie right outside their office. We walk in the IT department, ready to negotiate on a price for the flathead. Fortunately for my bank account, the plan changed when one of them dared to insult the God of Thunder. Just like my homie Fidel Castro back in the day, I was now legally allowed to execute everyone in the building for the mistakes of one man. After hammering the fuck out of everyone in the room, I went upstairs to do the same thing and got my hands on the flathead for free. It was time to escape the IT department, and my god, was it a bloody escape. For each hammer thrown, at least 5 different body parts started flying, some even into my mouth. At one point, I had so much pure power and testosterone coursing through my veins that I just spontaneously combusted when shoulder tackling some nerd. I eventually arrived at the Roy's boss fight, which was made pretty easy because of my levitation ability. My strategy pretty much consisted of throwing my hammer at him while safely hovering in the air, waiting for my stamina to recharge behind cover, and once he starts increasing his power level, I could safely implant my hammer into his skull. After making his brain no work goodly anymore, with a final hammer throw to the skull, we successfully escaped the IT department with the flathead in our hands. On my way to Lizzie's bar, I spotted a dangerous group of criminals on the street committing the worst crime of them all, and that crime was existing near me while I had the bloodlust. I quickly fled the murder scene and met Evelyn Parker at Lizzie's bar. I speedran all her dialogue, put on the Jerkmate headset, and I located Odin's search history in Konpeki Plaza. Now that we had the flathead and located the chip containing Odin's search history, it was time to go to the afterlife to start the heist. After a brief discussion about the geopolitical and economical state of the world, we roleplay as a taxi riding guy and arrive at the Konpeki Plaza Hotel. In our hotel room, I tried to save the flathead the trouble of moving through the ventilation system by doing it myself with mods. Unfortunately, for some reason, there's a massive boulder in the ventilation system that prevents me from doing that. Immersion, broken, game, unplayable. I eventually gave up and let the flathead take out the security systems so we can walk in the penthouse. As we were grabbing the chip that contains Odin's search history, some unexpected guests arrive at the penthouse and we have to quickly find a hiding spot. I couldn't find a hiding spot in time, so I had to resort to just standing so motionless in the middle of the room that I'm practically invisible to the naked eye. This actually worked better than expected, up until the old guy gets grabbed by the non-old guy, and once the old guy dies, the entire hotel gets put on lockdown. We make our escape along the edge of the roof, but get spotted by a security drone, so we have to jump off and hope that there's a high-calorie individual below to soften the fall. All of Arasaka's special forces were officially now on our ass, so I called upon my hammer and began creating some obituaries. Safe to say that the obituaries aren't gonna have any pictures in them, considering the hammer rips people's heads off harder than a pet chimpanzee. The other Thor-related equipment was also pretty strong as well, like being able to stun lock an enemy with a lightning arm cannon, or flying above a mech that wasn't programmed to look up 90 degrees. I felt stronger than a fat kid in cosplay at his first anime convention, so instead of running straight to the getaway car, I decided that everyone must die. Next, we finally get in the getaway vehicle. I technically failed the challenge by having to shoot a gun, but it doesn't count. Jackie inserts Odin's search history in my brain. Wish he hadn't done that. And I arrive at Black Loki's apartment. Black Loki tells me to go wash Jackie's blood off my face, but I was so traumatized by Odin's search history that I ended up smashing the mirror instead. That mirror must have been a family heirloom or something, because Black Loki got so mad that he shot me in the head. I briefly play as the god of ego, Johnny Silverhand, but nothing in this section counts towards me failing the challenge, since it's not me I'm playing as. Now back in the real world, I witness my black brother Loki get shot by none other than our father, Odin, who is currently in the disguise of a random Japanese man. I'm forced to use a gun, once again failing the challenge, but fortunately, it doesn't actually count since Odin crashes into a nearby pole, which erased all my memories of failing the challenge. Fast forward one day after the car crash, Odin calls me up on the holo and tells me to meet him at Tom's Diner so he can better express his disappointment towards me in person. At Tom's Diner… Wait, who the fuck is that? Now that I sat at the right table, Odin tells me that in order to make up for trying to dethrone him, I have to help him solve the case of who and how did someone get access to his search history. In order to solve this mystery, I have to track down Anders Hellman, the creator of the chip containing Odin's search history, and Evelyn Parker, the person who somehow knew the location of the said chip. With my newly adopted black son in tow, I went to meet with Rogue to get information on Anders Hellman's whereabouts. For the price of €15,000, she gives me Hellman's location and tells me to recruit Pan and Palmer to assist me. Now that I had all the information I needed on Hellman, I picked up my adopted son and began making my way to Pan and Palmer. As I was dumping my newly adopted son in some lucky guy's trunk, I made a decision. And boy oh boy was it a big one. Since Cyberpunk's release, I don't think I've seen anyone, myself included, drive a vehicle in first person for longer than a minute. To right that wrong, I made a sacred vow to only drive in first person for the duration of this whole challenge. I ended up quickly abandoning that idea when I accidentally recreated one of those dashcam videos I keep seeing on TikTok. Well, that's a lie. I did give it one more try after that, but the end result ended up being just as deadly as the previous attempt. I eventually meet famous feet model Pan Am, and she tells me to pay her in advance by helping her steal a new car. She had gotten word that a competitive hide-and-seek game was going to happen tonight in a small town called Rocky Ridge. Our master plan is to wait until nightfall and steal one of the hiders' cars while they were all hiding. There was a change of plans at the last minute, and I decided to just kill all of them for various reasons, mainly sport, before stealing the car. Unfortunately, these people are the horror movie surviving kind, as they had packed guns for their nighttime abandoned town hide-and-seek game. This is where being able to call the hammer by dashing really started to shine. I could sit on the roof for as long as I'd like and keep throwing my hammer and calling it back until they eventually died from a lack of limbs. Next, we finally got Pan Am a new truck, dealt some drugs to war veterans, briefly visited Hell, and Pan Am comes up with a clever plan to capture Hellman. The master plan involves bombing Hellman's AV like it's Pearl Harbor and chasing after it until it eventually goes down. Kang Tao is one of the top weapons manufacturers in the Cyberpunk universe, but not even their AI-powered Power Rangers stood any chance when they came face to face with the god of hammers, Thunder. After hammer time was officially over, we open up the AV and find Mitching Mitchell being held hostage. Before Pan Am shoots the hostage taker, he let it slip that Anders Hellman is hiding at a nearby gas station, so that was our next destination. I wanna quickly point out that I was nearing blackout drunk when playing this mission, and as I'm editing this video, I have no idea what's going on in this clip. Anyways, I picked up my newly adopted Mitch, left him behind almost immediately, and began making my way to the gas station. It could be due to me forgetting to upgrade my hammer and it still being tier 1, or the fact that I was barely conscious when doing this mission. Whatever the case may be, I was for the first time, even if only briefly, on the other side of the hammering, and it was not very fun. Eventually, I had enough and upgraded my hammer to tier 2, which allowed me to get the upper hand on my enemies and locate Anders Hellman. I knocked out the sissy boy with one punch, interrogated him in my motel room, and he gives me the chip's blueprints. It was now time to track down Evelyn Parker, but before that, I had to purchase a vehicle worthy of the God of Thunder. This little chick magnet packs a devastating 5 horsepower, a non-turbo engine, a busted AC, and all of this while having the sex appeal of a stage 4 cancer patient. Not to even mention how good it is at dispersing a peaceful protest at just a push of a single pedal. This is some truly remarkable technology. Sometime later, I finally arrived at Evelyn Parker's place of work called Clouds, looking for clues to her whereabouts. Once I left my hammer at the entrance and went past the front door, I was in complete and utter shock. This was not a cotton candy store like I was led to believe, but instead a house of self-made women. This is a strictly family-friendly channel, so I called my hammer and took it upon myself to make a real change in the management. Several employees were legally terminated along the way, including the general manager, but in a much more brutal way. From searching his computer, I learned that Evelyn Parker has been shipped to a local ripper dog going by the name of Fingers, so his clinic was my next stop. Outside Fingers' clinic, his bodyguards were introduced to my hammer, and I politely made my way inside Fingers' office. After introducing my fist to his face, he tells me that Evelyn Parker has been kidnapped by Marvel Studios, who are forcing her to star in the upcoming Thor: Love and Thunder Part 2. The first Thor: Love and Thunder movie was, if put nicely, a pile of steaming dog shit wrapped in deer piss, and we certainly don't need a second one, so it was up to the God of Thunder to save Night City from that fate. The movie production staff were stronger than I expected, but I persevered and eventually found Evelyn Parker. I tried to ask her about the chip, but unfortunately it seems like we were too late and she was already brain dead. We took Evelyn's barely conscious body back home and scanned her memories for any clues about the chip's origin. From her memories, I learned that a gang called the Voodoo Boys might have some knowledge about the person who originally created the chip. It was now time to track down the Voodoo Boys in Pacifica to hopefully get some long-awaited answers to my questions. I arrived at the local church in Pacifica and noticed that the priest was not doing his job very well. Instead of asking for donations, he was preaching about God, which isn't very profitable. So I took his place and, like every megachurch pastor, started selling blessings for 3,000 a pop. I made enough money to retire 5 times over and get approached by a man who tells me to seek out Placide. After a chat with Placide, he tells me to do a job for the Voodoo Boys in exchange for some information on the chip. The said job is to break into the Grand Imperial Mall, kill everyone inside, and hack into the Netwatch mainframe. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm pretty sure Placide explicitly told me to do the job quietly and I guess not kill everyone in the building. Oh well, Placide's not the first father figure I've disappointed, so I accepted the fact that I'm a failure and proceeded to finish what I had started. Once the enemies were no longer existing, I tried to download the Netwatch data but got cut off mid-download by the Netwatch agent. On my way to the theater where the Netwatch agent was hiding at, I run into the god of performance-enhancing drugs, codenamed Sasquatch. Sasquatch here may in fact have more muscle mass than me, more testosterone than me, and maybe even bigger genitalia than me. But the one thing she doesn't have is the ability to fly. This single advantage allowed me to get the upper hand and turn this entire fight into a joke. Not even a funny one. She eventually absorbed her last hammer blow, and I find the Netwatch agent hiding in the theater. I knocked him out, downloaded the data, and returned to the Voodoo Boys in hopes of finally getting the answers I'm looking for. The Voodoo Boys leader tells me she wants to scan the chip to find out its origins, so we enter cyberspace to do just that. I once again briefly play as the god of ego, Johnny Silverhand, but I don't really care since I can't use my hammer. Now back in the real world, Brigitte reveals she never had any answers for me and that she simply wanted to see Odin's search history for herself out of professional curiosity. In a fit of rage, I tried to kill everyone in my line of sight, but got brutally fucked so hard I gave up and left the Voodoo Boys hideout. A little while later, I get a call from Odin, and he's apparently got a lead in the case of the stolen search history. I meet him in Japantown, and he tells me the plan is to kidnap Hanako Arasaka during an upcoming parade and interrogate her for some answers. As per the rules of the challenge, I'm not allowed to stealth kill anyone during this extremely stealth-oriented mission. For a lesser man, this would actually be quite the problem. But for the God of Thunder, taking out all the snipers was about as easy as taking breast milk from a baby. or however that saying goes. I eventually find the Arasaka netrunner, and when unplugging that bitch out the mainframe, I get attacked by Hanako's bodyguard named Oda. Just like in the fight against Sasquatch, my strategy was to hover right above the boy toy cosplaying as a ninja and make it rain hammers on his face. It became very apparent that if my opponent didn't have any ranged attacks, they simply stood no chance against me in my final form. Once Oda lost consciousness, I hacked the security cameras, Daddy kidnaps Hanako, I waste my time destroying the robots because a god doesn't run, and I meet Takemura at his hideout. We interrogate Hanako, and she reveals that her brother, Yorinobu Arasaka, was actually the person who hacked Odin's search history and put it on the chip as leverage against Odin. Before she could reveal any other state secrets, Yorinobu's assault force busts in the building and steals Hanako from us. I went back to save my daddy from Arasaka Special Forces, and we escaped the building unharmed. Now that we knew that it was Yorinobu who stole Odin's search history, it was time to go and confront him once and for all. Anders Hellman, Odin, and I ride out to Yorinobu's mansion to free Hanako, so we could possibly persuade her to help us capture Yorinobu. Arasaka's best and brightest were among the toughest enemies I've encountered so far, but it didn't matter since by this point of the run, I had already reached my final form. So slaughtering all of them was about as easy as, say, I don't know. Now that we rescued Hanako from the terrible fate of having to live in an all-expenses-paid 3-story mansion, she agrees to help us capture Yorinobu. We took Hanako's private jet to Arasaka HQ and arrived at the board meeting, except Yorinobu was nowhere to be found. It turns out Yorinobu really hates boards, and especially meetings about them, so he called a hit squad on the whole meeting. Me and Daddy Allfather Odin began making our way to the top floor to make sure Yorinobu never gets access to Odin's search history ever again. As we reach the final floor, there is one more obstacle standing between us and justice, the god of cybernetic enhancements, Atom Smasher. As much as I'd love to say that this was a cinematic fight between two gods, the unfortunate reality is that he somehow managed to get stuck on literal air like 5 minutes into the fight. The final boss fight of the game ended up being a big fat nothing burger since Atom Smasher was just aura farming in the air for most of the fight. I say most because he did break out of that stun lock at 30% HP, but by then, the fight was pretty much over. There was one cool thing to highlight though that probably broke the rules of the challenge, which is that you can actually land a takedown on Atom Smasher. This was the first time in my 600 hours of playtime that I've actually seen that happen, which is pretty cool, I guess. Anyways, now that I got back in Odin's favor by helping him solve the case of the missing search history, I confronted Yorinobu and beat Cyberpunk 2077 as the God of Thunder. If you liked the video, subscribe and tattoo my channel's URL on your forehead. If you dislike the video, tattoo don't subscribe and then my channel's URL next to it on your forehead.